Hello to you, our lovely patrons, and welcome to episode 2 in our new exclusive series that we're calling Prestigious Pints. In our series opener, we brought to you none other than Agile legend Mike Cohn. And we haven't lowered the bar at all for episode 2, because joining us in our virtual pub this episode is the product owner guy himself, Roman Pichler. Yes, indeed. Roman is someone that Paul and I have both been proud and happy to be able to call a friend over the last 15 years, as well as work with him. And we've been inspired by his work, as I'm sure most of you have as well. So it was great to welcome him in, and we had a chat about all sorts of different things, starting off with how we get empowerment and courage as a product owner, whether product owners should be invited to sprint retrospectives, and the fact that we probably can't rely on our users to innovate for us. Naturally, we look back over the last 20 years and what's changed, and a little bit forward as to what might be in the future. And Roman even gave us a bit of an insight into how he feels about being known as the product owner guy. Well, we hope you enjoy it as much as we did. Grab yourself a drink and settle into our virtual pub for episode 2 of Prestigious Pints with Roman Pichler. Cheers.
Hey, all right. Hello, Roman.
Hello.
How are you?
All right. How are you guys doing?
Very good. Welcome to our virtual pub.
Thank you. Nice to be in the virtual pub.
Although it looks like we're in three. We're going to treat it like we're in the same place, despite us having 3 different backgrounds behind us. But it's as close to the pub as we're going to get, I think.
Yeah.
Right now.
But imagine you got a 360 camera, because we can't be sitting next to each other. So each of us has got a different part of the pub behind us. That's what it is.
Yeah, well, that could work in a big pub.
It's quite a fancy pub.
It's a pleasure to have you here, Roman. Have you done a pubcast with us before?
I don't think I have. So it's
really
first time for me. Yeah.
Welcome.
All excited.
It's good to have you here. So we're welcoming Roman for another one of our Prestigious Pints episodes, especially for our patrons. So this is a very welcome guest, and Roman goes way back with both Jeff and I. In fact, back as far as the first time I met you, Roman, we were in the same room with Ken Schwaber teaching, quite scarily, trying to teach a CSM together.
Mm-hmm.
That was goodness knows what year that was, probably 2006, I'm going to say. Would that be right?
I think so. Yeah, it probably was sort of May time or so.
Yeah, and it was
2006.
It was, what was the name of the hotel in London?
For some reason, I came along and
you were there.
my head in, didn't I?
You
stuck your head in. You
were underground somewhere. There was no windows. Is that right?
I remember the name of the hotel. It's on the tip of my tongue. It's the one.
It's near Holborn, isn't it?
Yes,
Holborn
the Grange Holborn. That's it. What it was. Yeah. And there was about. It must have been about 70 students in his class. Some obscene number of people that Ken was teaching, and then he'd just say, "Okay, Paul, away you go," and just throw you in front of the lions. But yeah, that's the first time we met. I think that was a long time ago.
That's right. Yeah.
But anyway, cheers. Yeah, cheers. Have you got a drink there? I'll toast to you, Roman. But I'm drinking leftover Christmas cider. So that's what I've got.
I've got fancy today.
What have you got, Jeff?
Beer with a wax top. It's a wine bottle size thing. It's called It's a Ripper. This is a bit of a rip on an IPA. So
does the special waxed top make a difference, or is that just for show?
I think it's part of the marketing. I'll tell you that. I think it was quite expensive. It's 6.8%.
Oh.
It's a barrel aged beer or barrel cask beer or something.
While Jeff's pouring that, our viewers will know that I just drink very sweet, very samey cider. But yeah, I'm still drinking the pink cider I've got left over from Christmas.
Yeah, it's a wood aged IPA. Barrel aged beer.
With the glass that came with, was that part of the parcel?
Oh, yeah. It's part of the.
So
Very nice.
Drink the beer with from the glass. Fruity.
Review it.
Bit pineapples.
You just you picked a random fruit then, didn't you? Just try and
No, I read the back
just
of the
try and
bottle.
sound like you knew what you were talking about.
I read the back of the bottle. Cheers, mate. It's been a while since we've seen you.
Yeah, cheers, Roman. Nice to see you. What have you got a drink there, Roman? Are you joining us for a drink?
He's the designated driver.
Well, it's water. So.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Roman's driving us home.
Saves us the taxi money. That's very nice of him.
Just like
Yeah, no problem. I stopped drinking over 3 years ago. Drinking
Did
alcohol. Yeah, and I don't know. It just never really had the urge to go back. Or I should put this differently: the trade-off for me between starting to drink again and just the impact that it has on me personally, it just doesn't feel worth it really. And now it's been such a long time that I don't really miss it anymore. I mean, first Christmas without alcohol was a bit strange, everybody else drinking, but you sort of get used to it. So. And there's more alcohol-free beer now available, so I still drink alcohol-free beer. I enjoy that, and I had an alcohol-free wine over Christmas. That was all right.
the others are catching up.
Do you feel healthier? Kind of, the lifestyle's better off for not drinking?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for me, it was a process. I started winding down my alcohol consumption sort of, over the course of, I guess, a year, 1.5 years or so. And it's sort of in a way fizzled out a little bit. But I try to limit having some wine or beer to Fridays and then only to Saturdays. But still, I typically wouldn't sleep that well, and then could feel it the next morning. And the less I drank, the more I would actually feel the impact of the alcohol. So in the end, I just decided to stop. And yeah, it's sort of felt good. But the best thing for me is that I just have, in a way, Friday and Saturday evenings. I can fully utilize.
That is true.
Whereas usually I'd have like half a bottle of nice wine and maybe a beer or 2 beers, and then I'm a little bit happy.
Yeah. And your Saturday mornings you can start at a reasonable time, not like me. I think we did a quiz, a Zoom quiz with some of our friends, and we haven't done it. They're not half as popular as they were this time last year, Zoom quizzes with our friends, but we did one. We did one to celebrate the end of January. That was the highlight. Was we're going to send off January on a Friday night. But I only had maybe 2 or 3 drinks, but I felt awful in the morning. I think I'm losing my tolerance to it. I must be. But yeah, I know what you mean. It is nice to wake up on a Saturday or a Friday, a Sunday, and not have a thick head.
I think I don't want to sort of drag on and prolong this conversation, but I mean, for me, certainly, because you said you mentioned you noticed that change there for you, and for me, certainly with aging and getting older, my body just couldn't cope as well with alcohol. I mean, I used to drink quite a bit when I was younger and really enjoyed it, so that's certainly a bodily change for me.
Yeah, fair enough. No, fair call.
You mentioned that, so this is going to be my first attempt at trying to link what we're talking about to work-related stuff. So you mentioned that your first Christmas was a little bit weird when everyone else was drinking. I'm going to use the term peer pressure, although nobody was pressuring you in that situation, but perhaps an internal sense of peer pressure. Is there any kind of, have you ever come across any kind of peer pressure in the world of product owners?
Yeah, I think so. I think, product owners, like anybody, is susceptible to, I think, we're susceptible to comparing ourselves with others. And I mean, we grow up in a competitive environment, and organizations are usually competitive, at least to a certain extent. And so, I've certainly heard product people compare the tools that they use and, the knowledge they have, and, the products that they've looked after and the companies they've worked for. So in that sense, and pressure, I think product owners get quite a bit of pressure from stakeholders, sort of to get stuff done or take on certain features, put certain items on the product backlog.
I think it can be quite competitive, in terms, certainly in my my coaching and companies that I've seen, especially from a product owner point of view, in terms of almost, I'll say, bragging rights that between across the company that my product's outselling or pushing further, more feature availability, whatever it might be. But certainly that kind of competitive. I think that product owners are naturally, well, I think it's probably a good thing that they do feel a bit of a competitive nature. Would you think?
I was thinking of something else as well, actually, while you were talking there. In that, I think product owners have got to be prepared to stand out from the crowd. I know a lot of successful products are kind of building on what's already there and making them better, but if you want to build something a little bit different, you can't be worried about what other people are doing. You just got to not copy their stuff, not worry about what features are there in competitors' products, and just think, oh, what do I want in my product? What do my users want in my product? Do you get that as well?
So I think it takes quite a bit of courage to do, in a way, your own thing, and try and do something that is truly innovative, that is truly new. I think it's generally much easier if you do something similar to what's out there already, something similar to what the competitors are doing. I think whenever we try and innovate, there's a risk of failure. There's a risk that things don't work out, and some people are more comfortable with failure, and some people are less.
You've got to be a good product owner, right? You've got to be.
Well, in theory, you should be, but I mean, I tend to say to the product people that I work with, something like a growth mindset is helpful, and understanding that product management is a very diverse profession. There's so much to it. We can't know everything, and we only create value by offering something new. And if we do something new, then we're likely to make a mistake. We're likely to fail. It's something we have to get comfortable with. But personally, I can get quite frustrated when things don't work out for me, and I can be very impatient with my own work. So, it's not always easy, I think, to cope with failure. It's not necessarily easy to innovate, and I think that's on a personal level, and I think that has to do ultimately with how I view myself and the expectations I have for myself as an individual. But then I think. I nearly knocked over my glass here, getting all excited. Talking with my hands. But then I think it's also the organizational context people are in, right? Some organizations are more open to innovation and change. But I mean, reflecting on my own career, I've worked for large organizations where, I was essentially told not to ask so many questions and just get on with the job. Do as you're told. Come on. And if that's the environment you're in, then it can be tough to do something new and, experiment and try things out and risk failure.
I think I was talking to a company just this week, and they were, I was talking to product owners within their company, and they were, really switched on, really, really passionate about their product, really very, and absolute experts on the domain, on the user base, but they're very much held, I won't say held back, but they feel like there's a bit of a fight, a conflict between the company owners, really. So the company has delegated an area of responsibility to product owners within the company, but they still feel like the exec level or the directors, the owners of the company, could still potentially overrule them, which and very much quite nervous about challenging that and presenting an argument against the directors of the company that, well, whatever they say, we've got to do it. And I felt quite sorry for these particular product owners, because they clearly knew what was right and knew that maybe no was the right answer, but just quite paralyzed by not being able to challenge the very top of the company.
Yeah, and I think empowerment generally is a big deal for product people, for product owners, and it's kind of ironic, isn't it, that I think one of the reasons why Ken Schreiber chose the term product owner over product manager instead of product manager is to emphasize the level of authority and empowerment product people need, particularly in an agile context where, you know, we value collaboration, but we want to pull in the stakeholders and development teams, and maybe even have selected users and customers in sprint review meetings, and sort of a little crowd there, right? So, you know, there has to be one person who can then make a decision if no consensus can be achieved to keep the product moving forward. But I think that message got lost in time, and often product owners, product people aren't adequately empowered. They don't really have the authority to make the necessary decisions and stand up to senior stakeholders, including, you know, the managing directors, and say no and push back.
Yeah.
So I'm going to, I'm not challenging you here, Roman, but I am challenging something, because I think one of the biggest complaints that people have when they're talking to me is that my product owner is not empowered, and equally my product owners, well, the product owners would say, I don't feel empowered. But when I speak to their bosses, they say, oh, why don't they just make decisions? You know, they have they say they want autonomy, but they're not using it. And yeah, there is an element of perhaps those bosses aren't aware of how overly influential and undermining they are. But equally, I think there's an element of self-sabotage of the product owners who, when we talked about bravery, they don't actually want to risk. And so they'll hide behind supposed lack of empowerment, so that they don't feel that failure. Have you seen that?
Yeah. Oh no. I mean, you know, that sort of resonates with me. And I guess, you know, it takes two to tango, as they say. And it sort of reminds me of a conversation I had with a product owner a little while back, and she complained to me that her management, that she felt her management didn't really allow her to take ownership of the product roadmap and make strategic product decisions. And that's a fairly common complaint I hear from product owners. And so, you know, we got talking, and I said to her after a little while, well, have you created a product roadmap again? You comfortable to create a product roadmap now for your product and present it to your boss? And she looked at me and said, like, no, why? So I said to her, well, you know, it's a tricky one. It's sort of a bit of a chicken and egg problem, it seems to me. It's kind of hard for your boss to trust you to take full ownership of your product if you may lack some strategic skills, product management skills. And at the same time, of course, I understand that you want the support from your boss, but maybe given the situation you're in, the best thing might be to try and, you know, read up on product road mapping practices and create a roadmap and show it to your boss. And that way you're being proactive and you demonstrate that you know your stuff, you have the skills, and also, you know, you really want to take full ownership of your product.
Yeah.
But I don't think that was necessarily what she wanted to hear. I think she wanted me to tell her that her boss would have to change.
Yeah.
Everyone always expects the other person to change, the other person to do. Yeah,
everyone wants to go to heaven, but no one wants to die.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been one of the, I would say that's probably been one of the hardest parts of my job over the last 15-20 years, is having to tell people the things that they don't want to hear. I think that's ultimately one of the benefits, or the reasons for taking an agile approach, is that transparency, isn't it? It's that brutal transparency of, well, let's just deal with reality. Maybe it's a message we're going to have to suck it up, but better we know it now. Did you always, because you've crafted it, you are known as the product owner guy, right? That's not a, that won't come as a surprise to you, I'm sure. Is that something that you always wanted to go down that track? Is that was always an area of passion for you?
I think it's been an area of interest for me for a long time, but there were several developments really that led me down that path. One was starting up my own business and having to take care of the services and products and thinking about them more. So, you know, that sort of really kind of caused me to start practicing product management properly. And then I started first working with product managers back in 2001, and that was also in an agile context. And that collaboration wasn't necessarily fruitful in the sense that the product became a success. It ultimately didn't, unfortunately. but it was very interesting because, you know, until then I had more of a development and technology focus, and then, you know, talking to product people and working with, in fact, it was a small team of product managers for a brand new healthcare product. It was a very interesting experience and something that kind of stuck with me. And then when I started my own business, I was more focused initially on development processes and Scrum and Agile frameworks. But you know, partly due to the two factors that I just mentioned, that interest and the necessity to learn more about and practice more product management within my own business, and then the development within that space, I felt that actually specializing myself and going for what was back then a niche, I viewed it as a niche market, at least. Sort of, you know, that product owner piece, that might be a smart thing to do.
We spoke to Mike Cohn a few weeks back, Roman, and he talked quite frankly about how he's changed and how his views on certain things. He would be a lot more strong on certain subjects now than he was perhaps back 10, 15 years ago. Do you think, has your perception of the product owner role changed since you've mentioned 2001 or that 20 years ago? Do you think it's moved on since then?
Oh yeah, I think so. And you know, I think, you know, as I change, my outlook on things changes. But I also think that, you know, our understanding of you know, how Agile practices, how Agile concepts, techniques, and practices can be applied has changed. As you know, I mean, I'm sure yours has changed, and you know, I think as a community, as a group of people, it has changed. But yeah, so it has changed.
Yeah, I think
one thing
right.
that stands out. You think that you just think completely differently about now than you did 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think, you know, sort of for me, a big area in the last few years, certainly, and that's sort of something that you know is sort of, I don't know if it's new, but I mean, when I first looked at product management and started working with product people, it was really all about the hard skills and, in a way, that the core practices, and initially also more, you know, tactical practices and development related practices. I remember literally nearly 20 years ago sitting down with one of the lead product manager and looking through use cases, you know, piles of use cases that she'd written, and talking to her about the need to prioritize them so that, you know, we could run some iterations. And so, you know, I initially focused a lot on these hard skills, but I think over the years I learned that while the hard skills are important and that expertise is extremely valuable for product people, without a doubt, the people skills, the soft skills are just as important. And I mean, you know, Jeff, I mean, that's an area you've worked on as well, right?
Definitely, yeah.
That's a trend I think I've seen in more recent product owner training and coaching, is that the area of agile change agency, or kind of, it used to be back in the day, back in very much a Scrum Master's remit, and I think whilst that hasn't changed, but I think a lot of product owners that I speak to now are becoming a lot more agile aware, rather than something that's being inflicted on them. It's now something that they're intrinsically part of. So I think the question always comes up in my classes about who is an agile change agent within a Scrum team, and I think more people now are more willing to listen and to respond as product owners, because product owners can have a huge amount of influence on the agility of a company. It shouldn't just always come from the Scrum Master's remit, in my opinion, certainly.
I got I mean, the word for me over the last 20 years from a product owner space is the word empathy. That's what stands out for me. Now, when
empathy for who? For the product owner, or for?
Well, this is where I'm going with it.
Okay.
I think historically, if you go back to 2001, the empathy needed to be developed from the product owner for the development team, and from the development team for the users. I think those were the two glaring sort of gaps, if you like. The product owner was traditionally very hard-nosed, as I saw it, business-focused, profit-focused, return-focused, market-focused, very, in many ways, rightly so. And the development team was seen as a cost to try and achieve that as quickly as possible. And that awareness of actually engaging the team and their creativity and iterating and collaborating, that developed a great sense of empathy. And I think that had a massive success. But then where I think it shifted is actually, and I'll say this with a flippancy, but there's a seriousness beneath it, is that there's become an appreciation from the development teams that I work with that their product owners are actually human beings. And so an empathy that the product owner has a ridiculously difficult job. And that shift there, coupled with actually product owners have developed a greater sense of empathy for themselves because they realise that they are humans themselves. And actually they don't have to be the hard-nosed robot looking for profit all the time at any cost. That sense of, well, let's take our time, let's have a think, let's work with people, let's show some vulnerability, let's ask the questions, let's not think that we have to have all the answers, let's test things that are imperfect. And that sense, that for me has been the biggest shift that I've seen over the last 20 years. Tumbleweed. Cheers.
No, I would say, I was going to say something else there about, this is the perception as well, I think, that has changed over the years. With the one that always comes up for me is retrospectives. And I always ask the question, who should attend a retrospective? And there's this, someone will always say, well, should the product owner attend the retrospective? And I think that's something that has changed quite a lot over the years, is that whilst it was, and some teams, companies will still say, oh no, don't invite the product, definitely not. We wouldn't want to air our dirty laundry with the product owner. But I see it more and more now that it's just they're part of that team, they're part of that. They need to hear these things as much as, if not more, than the development team themselves. So I think that's changed over time as well. The retrospectives become a much more inclusive event for those people as well.
Do you encourage product owners to go to retros?
I do, yes. Yeah, no, I like to ask when I run a product owner workshop who attends the retrospective, and ask those individuals who don't attend why not. And when people say like, oh, my development team doesn't really want me to be there, I say like, oh, how interesting. Maybe that's what you should talk about in the very next retrospective, because it seems that the collaboration and the connection with the development team members isn't quite as good as it could and maybe should be, and might be even a trust issue.
You can guarantee they're probably whinging about you in that person in that retro as well. So it's kind of a whinge fest. But yeah, I think it's a strong sign if that team is, if that product owner feels is the first person sat down at that meeting rather than the last person to be invited.
It is tough though for product owners, and sort of striking that balance between building a close and trustful connection with the development team members, but at the same time also engaging with the stakeholders, the key stakeholders, and keeping an eye on the market and talking to users, maybe observing users using the product. So combining that inward and outward perspective, and with regards to the inward work, the work inside the business, attending not only to the development team but also sufficiently to the stakeholders. So, I can it's because I'm saying this because sometimes when I suggest to product owners to attend the retrospective, they look at me, roll their eyes, and say like, oh, yet another meeting I've got to go to now.
Yeah, very true.
Have you seen? Sorry, have things changed over the last year? So obviously it's impossible to have one of these podcasts now or have a conversation with anybody without talking about the pandemic. But have you seen product owners pivot their techniques? So having the customer observation, you said there, just observing your customers, it's you can't do it certainly as easily as you could. You can't get your focus groups as easy as you could. How have you seen product owners pivot to this new way of working?
Well, I don't know. So there's obviously only so much experience and insight I have, and it's quite limited in a way. But I think there's been a massive shift anyway in the last 5 to 10 years away from qualitative to quantitative, ultimately market and user research, and more and more product people using more and more powerful analytics tools. And like 10, 15 years ago, I think interviews and observations, and even things like, I remember reading in the Harvard Business Review way back a story about, I think it was researchers at Lego moving in for a few months with families in the US, Japan, and Europe, sort of the main target markets back then, to understand better how the kids would play, and not only with Lego but generally.
Yeah.
And so that sort of really intimate level of research and that real immersion into your target audience, I think that in a way has been replaced to a certain extent with using analytics tools for various reasons. One is because it's easier, and it's quicker, and it's way cheaper.
And it's less subjective in a way, isn't it? So
it can be, yes. It can be, yes. Yeah, I mean, it would certainly generate way more data. We just then have to be careful not to be too biased when we look at the data and interpret it. But I mean, and I think for many product people, that's just literally continued. And I do think that, we can still use prospective users or existing users and customers through what we're doing right now, right? A Zoom call, a Zoom session, and, you can still observe by asking people to share their screen and see how they would interact with the app. Or hold up their phone if it's deployed on a handheld device. But I mean, for me, as valuable as it is to use analytics tools, and I mean, I use analytics tools in my own work, as I'm sure you guys do. I always feel that, if the qualitative element is missing, then it's kind of hard to empathize. Going back to what you said earlier, Jeff, I can't empathize with data. I can only empathize with human beings. So for me, it is important to make an effort to still occasionally, I like to suggest once a month as a rule of thumb, meet selected users and customers and at least talk to them. So to really understand what's happening for them. And I think that then helps me make better decisions as the person in charge of the product, rather than just relying on anonymized data.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's quite an old school perspective. I don't know. I mean, I'm getting old. No, it's one of those things where I think the pendulum's kind of swung one way. You know what I mean? I mean, we started out with lots of qualitative and, quite time intense research, and it's kind of swung, I think, nearly a little bit too far towards, let's use this analytics tool and more data.
Did you ever watch that? Bear with me on this one. Did you ever watch that TV show House with Hugh Laurie as the doctor?
Yeah, the medical thing.
No, what's that? I'd recommend it. It's one of my favourite things ever. It's absolutely fantastic. So I won't put any spoilers out there, but basically, Hugh Laurie is an incredibly intelligent, talented doctor, but he's a bit of a dick, and he basically doesn't have a lot of time for human beings, and one of his premises: people always lie. So trying to get a diagnosis from a patient is pointless, because they will never tell you the truth, often because of embarrassment or whatever. And users often don't tell the truth, not consciously, but they will tell people what they think they want to hear, in a way, and also what they would like to believe about themselves. And so actually what people say they do and what they actually do can be two very different things.
Is this linked to the story about the Walkman?
Yeah, definitely.
Go on, you have to tell that, because that's a good one.
Well, I always get it wrong, but the essence of it is, I can get. Sony did some. I'm not talking to you, Roman, because you know what I'm going to say. But the research on the colour of the Walkman, the boombox or whatever it was, and people say, yeah, we love yellow. Yellow's great. Red's great. Yeah. Thanks for your input, custom focus group. Please take a Walkman of your choice on the way out, and everybody took black. And that, what you say you're going to do and what you actually do can be two very different things. As a product owner, you've got to be really careful of that, right?
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. And I don't think we should expect that users and customers innovate for us and tell us what our product should do, what it should look like. The same is true for the stakeholders. I don't expect that stakeholders tell product people what their product should do or look like. I think that's really the job of the product owner together with the development team to figure that out. At the same token, when we look at a process like Scrum, then I always like to think the product owner and the team should be empowered to take the first step and build a product increment. But then we validate the decisions, we validate the product decisions essentially that we've taken by putting it in front of the stakeholders and selected users and customers and carefully listening to what they have to say. And then we think about it, we analyze their feedback, we analyze any data that we've gathered, and that hopefully will help us to make the right decisions and adjust essentially the product backlog, and therefore then drive the next product increment. And so, of course, we can say, oh, yeah, it's not a big deal. I mean, we just release product increments on a regular basis, and so we collect the data, and that's cool. But the drawback with quantitative approaches is that it's very difficult to find out why somebody did or didn't do something. So the intention, the motivation, the underlying need is kind of hard to uncover. I think that's where at least selected qualitative measures come in. So I always like to think quantitative and qualitative approaches shouldn't compete, but they should complement each other, and it'd be kind of nice to mix and match. And maybe the standard way that somebody operates, a team, a product owner uses is to release product increments early and frequently. That's cool, but maybe then once in a while, every 2 months, every 3 months, you still do some direct observations, you still do some usability testing, you still do some interviews.
Yeah. It's and it's always, every product you're gonna need a different balance, and even for a particular product, the state that product is in its maturity and life cycle, your balance is going to be different between qualitative and quantitative. So it's I think a lot of product owners that I work with, they find that really difficult. The fact that they can't just follow a blueprint, if you like. They can't. There's no right answer that they can actually calculate and then check at the back of the book, And so this brings us all the way back to that sense of being comfortable with failure, if you like. But I'll tweak the wording slightly and saying just be comfortable with imperfection, because you'll never have perfection as a product owner. You just can't get that. And if you're aiming for it, that's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as it's a healthy ambition. But it's potentially quite damaging if you're hoping for it and you know you can't get it.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right. There's no blueprint. I mean, there are techniques that people can use, but it's I sometimes think a good product owner is somebody who has a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit, and is in that sense then willing to take informed risks and stick her or his head out a little bit. Still may not be nice then, to sort of experience some form of failure or setback, but again, that'll be part of that process. But really the wish, the motivation just to move things forward and maybe bring about some change and do something different.
There's a lot to be said, isn't there, for almost, and this comes a little bit back for me to the kind of the CEO kind of stakeholder here. Is that I can think of one company where the CEO is quite resolute on the fact that that our users don't know what they need yet. You have to trust me. We should gamble on this, and we should back that horse. We should go with that, because those users don't really know. They're going to love it when they see it, and they just don't know they want. And it's balancing that. What's our data telling us compared to what is our data not telling us. It's the gaps, it's the stuff that we're not testing for yet, it's the stuff that people don't even know that they need that feature yet. And that's, I think, where that sense of gambling as a product
I'm not saying
owner,
that guy's wrong, right? Because quite often those CEOs are they're right.
I think you need that element of risk taking, Jeff. Well, that CEO that's being awkward.
You do, but there is a good way to take risks. And what often happens in those situations is that person is they're not crafting a scientific experiment. They're crafting an experiment to prove themselves right. And their confirmation bias will see that. And okay, maybe at some point the money will run out, people won't buy it. But it's too late then. Those people need to be humble enough to be able to say, okay, I've got this hypothesis, but I don't know if it's right yet. I want to find out, rather than I know this is right, I'm going to keep going until everybody out there proves me right by buying this goddamn thing.
I wonder if it's about more of having a sandbox to play in, about having a continuous experiment to run, that then it's not all riding on one decision, that we've got multiple decisions like this, being played around with all the time, that it gives, almost giving that CEO that license to, if you want to play with your toys, go and play with this team, can build some toys for you, and then see if anything sticks at the wall, rather than it's distracting. Take the distraction away from a product that's trying to grow, and whether it needs to be something separate anyway. I don't know what the answer is.
There's a big balance, isn't there, between having, because a product owner does need confidence. They do need to have a point of view and give it a go and stick with it in the early days, because experiments take time to come up, products take time to land and grow. But equally knowing when to walk away.
You mentioned, Jeff, that empathy, you're trying to build empathy, and I think the level of empathy between development teams and product owners has grown. I would agree with that. But I think there's still a lot of development teams that I speak to, that I coach, that want a sense of certainty from a product owner. They want a product owner to be able to stand up in a planning session and say, this is the right thing to do now, trust, and I want you to go with me on this. So I think if that's a facade that the product owner has to wear, even if they don't know it, but I think this team does still need some sense of authority around that, and direction, certainly.
I think what I hear you say, Paul, is really that product owners should offer some leadership in the product space, and I would certainly agree with that. I do think it's important that product owners have an opinion about where to take their product, and I do think it's important that product owners articulate this opinion to the development team and to the stakeholders. But I also believe that it's equally important to take the opinions, hold the opinions lightly, and not forget to cultivate an open mind. So it's sort of that balance, right, between ideally, as the product owner, I understand the market, I understand the users and customers, I understand the competition, I understand trends and dynamics in the market, and I've got an opinion, and I've got an idea, I've got maybe even a strong idea and vision of where I want to take my product. But then, I might be wrong.
Yeah. I think,
and I'm willing to admit that, and I'm willing to be vulnerable in that sense, and I'm willing to listen and humble enough to listen to the development team, listen to the stakeholders, and particularly listen to the users and customers, and try and look at any data and any feedback that comes in as objectively as I possibly can, and I try and be aware of my attachments, my biases. We know how this works, right? I mean, the longer we work on our products, the more energy and time we've invested in it, the more it tends to be our baby, and the more we tend to be attached to it, and the less open we tend to be to negative, critical feedback.
Yeah. I'm interested, Roman, because this comes up in courses as well that I teach product owners. So we talk about stakeholder management, we talk about trying to kind of classify and categorize stakeholders. What's your view on the Scrum development team as a stakeholder? Do you think they should be a stakeholder in product backlog decision making? Is that a risk? Is that a benefit? What's your view on that?
So when I use the term stakeholder, I always tend to think of the internal business stakeholder. So for commercial revenue generating product, that'd be somebody from marketing, sales, support, maybe finance, operations. Yeah. So those guys, marketeer, sales rep. I always look at the development team more as for whatever reason, as a separate. So I typically don't subsume or classify the development team as a stakeholder, but more as, I guess, a partner. Even so, I'd also argue that ideally, the stakeholders that I mentioned, a marketeer and a sales rep, should also become, at least over time, a partner. And as a product owner, ideally, I'd like to establish effective and trustful working relationships with those individuals. Sorry, what was the question?
No, I'm wondering if development teams should have a say
backlog.
In terms of backlog prioritization, because I think they do. They certainly have opinions in my experience.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's good practice really to work on the product backlog together. So product owner and development team, and I think there's a mutual benefit here. The benefit for the product owner is to leverage the knowledge and expertise of the development team and understand, where technical risks. Often, as the person in charge of the product, that's not something that I fully understand, that I'm fully aware of. And by doing prioritization together, by maybe refining product backlog items together, working on the product backlog together, I ensure that there's a shared understanding, that people understand what those items, what those stories mean. And by inviting people to make product decisions, I usually increase the chances that people support those decisions, that people buy into those decisions.
Yeah.
And the benefit from a development team perspective is that, as developers, we can be more proactive and we can influence and we can contribute to decisions and we can shape the product. And we also learn more about the product. And, we're not solely dependent on the product owner all the time.
Yeah.
Over time, we may be able to answer, some of the questions that we have amongst ourselves, because we just pick up appropriate domain and market and product knowledge.
I've seen it massively. I wouldn't say transform, but in terms of morale and motivation, I think there is if you want, like you said, the words buy in there. And I think teams feeling part of that decision-making process, or at least understanding the decision-making process. There's a lot of teams that, unfortunately for them, work on a very boring product, which actually generates their company quite a lot of revenue. So it's like, it's not great, and we're not working on the sexiest functionality at the moment. But this is kind of the stuff that's keeping our company afloat. So we understand its part in that process. And developers may not get what they want all the time, but I think certainly involving them. And I used to work in Nokia Music, where I'd say 70 to 80% of the development team members were all musicians. So they had a real passion in developing a music product. So I used to ask the question, why would we ignore that feedback and ignore those opinions? We may not take them all into account all the time, but you certainly want to have that voice heard as a recognised voice.
Roman, this is sort of stepping outside of the podcast a little bit and just going back to the three of us. But normally at the start we would say something like, we just talk and see where it goes, and if anything you say you don't want in the final cut, we cut it out. At what point did you realise that you'd become the product owner guy?
I don't know if I'm the product owner guy.
You are. You're the product owner guy. Everyone says to me, right, we need some stuff on product owners. I'm going to Roman. Go
and read this book. Let's go and read this book. And
you're the product owner guy. And I know it's very humble of you to say so.
I don't know. I think,
Do you enjoy it? Let me ask you a different question then. Do you enjoy being the product owner guy?
So, it's kind of nice. What is really nice is to see when people recognize the work and the effort that I do. That is generally very rewarding, and I think it's rewarding for anybody. It's also rewarding when people recognize not only recognize but recommend my work, and that's great. But I honestly try not to get too attached to a specific view of what I've achieved or who I am, because things change, and as much as I enjoy what I do, and I genuinely enjoy my job, I really do, and I'm grateful that I have the job that I have. I know at some point in time it's going to stop, it's going to end. So so I don't want to certainly think of myself as the mega product owner guru. And if people feel I've got something helpful to say, that's great. But the other people obviously out there, including you two gentlemen, that have very valuable things to say and very valuable advice too. So
do you feel the pressure of people maybe taking too much or reading too much authority into what you say. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, and it's certainly the case that I've sort of become a little bit more careful over the years, and I think I try and choose. I'm not sure that it always succeed, but I try and choose my words a little bit more carefully. Certainly, when I write stuff, and I have to say that, I did think quite a bit about my last book, and in the process of preparing to write it, and then during writing it, I sort of thought, that in a way I have a responsibility, because people may take notice, and they may, and so I wanted to make sure that it's a decent book, but it's also about something that I really care about, and I think that would be valuable for the individual readers, but also for the whole product management community.
When you would have done that when you were working at Siemens, I remember having a drink with you a while ago, and it's probably 10 years ago or something, and you're saying how frustrating it is when you hear people say, "But Ken Schwaber says," like it's an argument that should be listened to, and he's just a human being, and over the last 10 years or so, people have been saying, "But Roman Pichler says," and a lot of it is absolute gold, right? But you and I will spout a bit of nonsense now and again, or people will interpret what we've said in a different way, right? So,
right, yeah. None of us is perfect, and none of us is always right. I mean, we're all human beings, and we all make mistakes. It's natural, and so I always hope that people use any pieces of advice that I offer to make up their own minds, and then decide for themselves what is right and what is wrong. And I genuinely believe there is no one right way. And it's really then, for us as individuals to take ownership of our own decisions and get the information that will help us to make the right decisions, and then see where those decisions take us.
I would echo that as well. I'm now intrigued by your comment about one day my job's going to end. What would Roman do if he was not the product owner guy? What if you were not allowed to do anything to do with product management or Scrum ever again from tomorrow? What would you do?
What would I do? I think if it was right now, I'd probably have too much energy just to do what I enjoy otherwise, playing a little bit of music and riding my bicycle. I'd probably either try and get involved in a local business, or in a charity and do some work there, or possibly start up another business. But I do think it's important to care for our jobs, and as I said, I'm grateful for the job that I have. I truly am. But I also think it's dangerous to completely identify with a role that we play and a job that we have, because sooner or later that job is going to change. And I mean, who knows? Maybe somebody's listening to this, to this podcast and thinking, "Oh my God, Roman's really lost it now. I mean, he's talking a lot of crap, and suddenly, the reputation will be gone. It's tarnished."
We'll blame Paul for the edit. That's what we'll do.
Yeah, I should have cut that bit out. Yeah,
things change.
But you never had that sort of, I'm gonna set up a surf school on the beach or something like that.
I tried surfing many years ago, but I wasn't that good at it. And the trouble with water is it tends to be wet, and then here in the UK it tends to be chilly as well.
Yeah.
And then those surf suits, oh man, they're so tight. And the older I get, the tighter they become. I know there are quite a few, older blokes out there and ladies who surf and surf really well, but I think I just started it way too late. I don't know. I mean, why is that something that you aspire to?
No, I've got no sense. I've got no sense of balance. But no, I don't.
You can walk. You can walk, Jeff.
Yeah, I do have. I fall over now and again.
Well, his knees give way.
I've dislocated my knee playing darts, Roman. So I don't think surfing is my
standing still on an ocky playing darts, and you put your knee out.
Yeah, I don't think surfing's my future. But you've always been you're a big skier, aren't you?
I used to ski, yes. Yeah, I haven't skied for a number of years though. It's partly living in the UK and partly, I guess, just having a family. And the effort and the hassle of dragging people then across half of Europe to some slopes.
Yeah, it's not a simple task, is it? What do you think the future of Agile is?
What is the future of Agile? I don't know.
Or product development, maybe. What's the future of product development?
So for me, a lot of the basic ideas, or what I view as basic ideas in Agile, in Agile frameworks and Agile approaches still hold true. I think we can all still benefit. I think virtually all organizations can still benefit from more effective collaboration and a stronger focus on users and customers and value creation. I mean, for product management, I really think that empowerment is a big issue, and establishing product roles in organizations where people have the skills and people have the decision-making authority, and then also the responsibility and accountability that comes with it in order to progress products and run with their ideas. So I think that'd be really cool to see. I certainly hope that, say, in 10, certainly 15, 20 years from now, that's not going to be such a big issue. I also hope that product people will maybe continue to be, or be even more strategic. So I always think it's kind of nice to take care of the product backlog and help identify and write some epics and user stories. That's good stuff. But I think it's even more important to understand and be clear on the strategy that you have in order to make or keep your product successful, and maybe be able to set some goals on a product roadmap for the next 6 to 12 months to align everyone and give everyone an idea of where the product is going. So I hope that that's gonna continue.
Cool. Not very good at predicting the future, I'm afraid. Me.
I'd like to think that startups, if there's a startup that's come out of this pandemic, maybe somewhere in 20 years time, if these startups are being led by people that really do understand that, like you said, that growth mindset, that product ownership, empowerment, and letting good people build good products. I don't think a lot of the difficulties product owners are having now will kind of ebb away. Maybe that's a false hope, but I'd like to think that maybe leadership is viewed very differently in 20, 30 years time.
That'd be nice. That'd be really nice. Yeah. That'd be cool. But then I guess just building on what you just said, Paul, I mean, it's called product management, right? But there's so much people stuff in there. I mean,
exactly. Yeah. People always get in the way, don't they?
That's the trouble. The trouble are the people. If it was only code, if it was
just robots. Maybe it's AI. Maybe artificial intelligence will be defining what products we need and building them for us. And
that reminds me then of some Ian Banks novels, right? Where the big minds, the big massive computers decide what the people should do across the galaxy, or whatever it is. So,
It's gone in Skynet, isn't it, Jeff? Terminator 2, another film you haven't seen, but end with Skynet and the Terminator's taking over the world.
That's Minority Report.
No, wrong film. That's Tom Cruise. Wrong actor, wrong film, wrong decade.
What was the thing where they're sort of moving the screens across like that?
That's Minority Report.
Yeah, but what did they call that? What was the system?
Oh, I don't know what the system.
I don't know the name. That wasn't Skynet.
It's not Skynet. No, that's wrong film. wrong genre.
Fair enough. All right.
Yeah, very good.
All right. Okay. Final message then, Raymond. What do you reckon? We've what's your final message to our listeners?
My final message. Love and peace.
World peace.
That goes without saying.
Yeah.
I think I like what you said, Jeff, about being happy with things not being perfect. And so I think a common mistake we make is to put ourselves too much under pressure and to expect in a way too much too quickly from ourselves. And because we expect it of ourselves, we also expect it of the people who are around us, the people that we work with. And so something that I wish for myself and for everyone is that we learn to maybe relax a little bit, and in the sense that we understand that we need to get stuff done, and there are things that we'd like to do, but some things just don't happen immediately, and if it doesn't work out immediately either, then that's not a problem. It's not a big deal. No big deal.
No big
That's
deal.
good.
No big deal. Cool. It was awesome, mate. It would have been obviously so much better if we were meeting in person, but it's been good to catch up with you. Thank you for taking the time, joining us in our virtual pub.
Well, thank you for having me. It was nice to chat with you, gentlemen.
Right,
You're going to warm the car up. It's pretty chilly out. Get the heated seats on, and we'll meet you out the front. We'll meet you out the back.
Of course.
Cheers, Roman.
Right. Thanks, guys.